Hello, everybody, and welcome in. This is the Wager Alarm live stream for Tuesday, October 29th, 2019. I am Craig Mish, and filling in tonight for Howard Bender is Dan Servadidio, who is going to talk a lot about some of the college and pro football games this week. Dan, thanks for filling in, and thanks for being part of our Wager Alarm live stream tonight. What's going on?
Of course, Craig. Yeah, it's always good to be visiting with you here and the chance to talk some football. You know, we got big college football and NFL matchups to talk about from last week, upcoming this week. So I'm always ready for it.
Yep, definitely are. And Dan was with me many weeks ago when we were starting off, right, with the college football season.
Yeah, I think it was week 1 of the college football season.
Yeah, I think it was. I think Howard was off to a concert or something of some sort. So we're happy to have Dan with us here for this live stream as well. Of course, John Impemba is producing tonight. So thanks to John also for stepping in for Matt Sells and doing this. Well, I wish the news was better to start off the live stream for those of you who follow us every single week. And what we always do is on Tuesdays, John, we go back and we review the picks that we made the week before. And you are basically the equivalent of walking into a cow pasture right after the cows were in the pasture, basically, unfortunately, because we did not have a good week last week with our picks. And for those of you who have followed us all season long, we're above 500 in both the Golden Nugget contest and the Las Vegas Westgate Super contest. But unfortunately, last week was not our best week. So I'll walk through some of the picks, and then Servo, you could tell me kind of what you thought about any of the games, if you watched them or if you watched them play out. And I'll tell you where we were right, where we were wrong, if we were on the right side, wrong side, and then we'll start diving into some of this weekend's games as well. And again, we'll be back on Friday night to have our picks. Also, Dan and I will have at least an opinion on Thursday night's game between the 49ers and the Cardinals. So let's start off. Liberty was one of the picks that we had last week. Liberty was -7 at Rutgers. Dan, Rutgers had not covered the spread 5 weeks in a row. They were outscored like 150-2. It was more than that, but something like that. And for whatever reason, and I watched some of the game on the Big Ten Network, Rutgers showed up like in a big way all of a sudden. Liberty had beaten several Division I teams going into the season. There are right calls and there are wrong calls, but that we were just completely off on that game. And Rutgers showed up, and both their running backs ran for a lot of yards against Liberty, and I guess this is the danger of this. But they were paid $1 million. We were making fun all week last week. Liberty was paid $1 million, but for homecoming. But Rutgers did pull out that win. I don't know if you caught any of that, but that was Rutgers' first win in since the opening week.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the games that I chose to in my best bets for Wager Alarm that I do weekly, and I actually chose Rutgers plus the 7.
Well, you should have let us know before we did the live stream.
Because just like you said, I mean, Rutgers was getting killed every single game. Every game. And yeah, as you mentioned, like, you know, Liberty was actually winning some games. They were 5-2 coming in. The thing I just couldn't understand Rutgers plus the 7. I thought maybe they'll lose, but they'll lose by 1 or 2. But I just thought they'd keep it close. I didn't think they'd win outright or win by that much.
Oh, they crushed them. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was basically a win for Rutgers right from the first drive or so. But yeah, I mean, I thought Rutgers would keep it closer. So I got to say I'm against you guys on that one last week.
Fair enough. Going against us was definitely the way to go. Also, we picked Northwestern in the early game. They were getting 10.5 against Iowa. The game was close throughout, but it played out really exactly the way that Northwestern games have so far this season. They can't score at all, Dan. Like, I mean, at least give us a shot by scoring a 3 or a 7, but they're now one of the worst offenses in all of college football. By the way, Iowa is not much better. This game was the lowest total in college football of any game all season long going in, and it still went under the total. And so Northwestern was our second pick plus 10.5, and that was not close either. Iowa just went in there and just slogged through that game, and it was over quick.
Yeah, thankfully I didn't watch any second of that game because all these Big Ten games, it seems like it's so low scoring. They're just boring, and Iowa's been on the wrong side of those in the past, you know, against Michigan. Yeah. So I mean, this one I guess they just Northwestern, as you said, is just bad though, like Rutgers.
Yeah, Northwestern had a good year last year. In fact, they were ranked for a while until they fell apart late in the season. But you would think in a game where the total is 37 and you're getting 10 and you're getting 10.5 that you can sneak in a touchdown or maybe 10 They couldn't do anything. Texas against TCU. We had Texas -1 on the road. TCU ended up winning that game, always a rivalry game, and it was a very short line there. Basically, this game could have went out any which way. It almost went down to one of the last possessions of the game, but Texas ended up losing that, so we lose that one. Navy against Tulane. Navy was up 14-0 in this game against Tulane, so Howard was feeling really good about that one. And, Tulane came back to make it close. Navy ended up getting the win. They did not cover the line that they were on, and so that closed out our college football, thankfully, our first winless week in college of the season. In the NFL, what happens is in the Golden Nugget contest, we go with 7 picks, and you can have any combination of college and pro. Thankfully, we had a win in the pros, but we had to wait till Monday night to get that win because Dan Buffalo just didn't show up at all against Philadelphia. A lot of people wondered why the line was Buffalo -1.5, -2. Buffalo kind of took a step back in their season. Clearly, they're a good team, probably headed to the playoffs as well. But Philly, with their back up against the wall 2 weeks in a row, they didn't get it done against Dallas. But Servo, they did come to play against Buffalo. And despite the reports of the weather being 40, 50-degree winds, this game also flew over the total.
Yeah, and as an Eagles fan, I was watching this whole game out, and the wind was just an insane factor in this game. I mean, you couldn't, in the one direction, I forget which way, but the one direction you couldn't kick, you couldn't throw, and some of Josh Allen's passes were just ducks in the air. Probably should have gotten picked off a couple times, but they just couldn't get anything going. And with the Eagles' really good rush defense, I mean, the Bills' offense they had some drives, they just could not get anything going. So. But a game that, you'd expect the Bills to win that one at home. I mean, they were one of the hotter teams coming in, and the Eagles, as you mentioned, they just got blown out by the Cowboys the week before. So,
yeah, well, look, Philly now puts themselves at least back into the conversation in the NFC. They're up against it, of course, already with that loss to Dallas, and San Francisco having that great year. They're probably going to be a playoff team. Carolina, even though they lost a playoff team. Green Bay, Minnesota. The Rams, there are not going to be a lot of opportunities for Philly to get back in there, but that certainly was a good win. Probably our worst NFL loss of the season was taking Carolina at San Francisco. That probably was the worst loss of the year for any of them. I mean, we have not had a more lopsided pick of any of the ones we picked all season long. The Panthers were getting 5.5, and Dan, that game was over in 5.5 minutes. You knew that there was no shot whatsoever for Carolina. Kyle Allen has done a really nice job winning all the starts that he's been filling in for Cam Newton. But this just kind of shows that when he goes up against a real tough team, potentially he could have problems. I know he's going to get another start. And then I guess the notion is that in 2 weeks they'll go back to Cam Newton as starter against the Packers in that game. But that closed out the losses, and then we'll finally have a win here. But I don't know if you paid attention to the Panthers game, but they really had no shot in this one.
Yeah, wait, so you're saying you didn't see Tevin Coleman scoring 4 touchdowns in that game?
I think they rushed for 5 total in that game.
I think he could have had 5 himself.
My gosh, yeah. And Coleman, at the beginning of the year, I was like so off on Coleman. I'm like, oh, I don't think so. And then he got hurt. I was feeling good about that. But wow, like it just looks like whoever San Francisco has behind that offensive line is viable, whether it's Breida or Mostert or Wilson. Or, of course, now with Tevin Coleman, and now they have Breida hurt and maybe even Wilson too, so Mostert could get back in the conversation. But this team is running 35, 40 times a game in combination with all their other players. And with that defense, you'll probably, Servo, end up seeing more games like 2 weeks ago where they don't score a lot of points and beat teams like Washington. They beat them 9-0. Maybe you could see a lot of 17-3 type games. I mean, 51 points against a good Carolina team. It's shocking.
Yeah, this Panthers defense is a lot better than what they did on Sunday. I mean, they given up 51 points, and that was a weird game to watch because I think going in, we all thought, oh yeah, this is gonna be the last Kyle Allen week for Carolina. They're gonna go back to Cam this week, and he's already been ruled out again for this week. So I thought he'd be like kind of like the sacrificial lamb for that one.
Sure.
But they're going back to him this week. I guess Cam's not healthy, or I don't know what's going on there, but we'll go talk about this 49ers team once we preview the Thursday game. But yeah, this defense is insane. I don't think many people expected this defense to be that good. And going against a Carolina team that was kind of rolling, behind just giving McCaffrey a ton of touches, but McCaffrey got his in that game, but this Panthers offense just had no answers to keep up.
Yeah, and teams that have had more time to prepare against San Francisco have looked worse, which is crazy, but that's what happened this year. Rams, same thing. When the Rams got throttled by the 49ers, Rams were coming off a long time off. They played Seattle on a Thursday night. They had 10 days to get ready for San Francisco coming off a Monday night game. They lost just as bad as Carolina did. So if you don't think the 49ers are for real, you're kidding yourself. They're going 12-4, 13-3. They're going to have home field. And I would guess that they'll at least get to the NFC Championship or come close. Our lone win in the Golden Nugget, we had some wins in the Super Contest, thankfully. May have to start spreading these around a little more. The Dolphins on Monday night, which really was never in doubt. Well, I take it back. It was in some doubt because at the end of the game, if anybody would have just ran for a touchdown, if Connor was healtzy and would have just ran it in at the end, we may not have covered that one. But the Dolphins, I would say, Servo was the right side to take in that game. They were up 14-0. The other part of the Dolphins is that the savvy bettors are learning is that no matter what's happening with Miami in the second half of the games, they're playing very well in the first half of games. You could maybe start taking them against the spread in the first half. They played well against Buffalo, Washington, Dallas, and now Pittsburgh in the first half. Yeah. So it seems like when the second half comes, you don't want to say a team is quitting, but at least the game plan starts changing a little bit. And so we picked up our lone win with the Dolphins getting 14 points, and that was clearly the right bet on Monday night.
Yeah, and watching that game last night, it was weird to see the Dolphins get out to that 14-0 lead. But this defense was actually, they were amped. They were making plays against the Steelers. Made a couple bad throws off Rudolph and turned those into points. But the team, it's weird to see this Dolphins team that everyone says, and I say too, that they're tanking. They're trying to get Tua probably. The players are still playing hard, at least for that first half, as you mentioned. So, I mean, going forward, like you said, we should probably just take the Dolphins, on the first half money line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because, the second half comes and they just start giving up, I guess.
Yeah, and they fall apart. And now their best player, I don't know if he's even seriously hurt, but they put him on IR, Xavier Howard, so he's now out for the year. That's by far the best player.
And they traded Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, I wasn't big on him, but regardless of that, look, at this point, defensively was the key because this. I mean, at this stage of the game, Servo, with the Dolphins, you're getting a lot of points against whoever they play.
Yeah.
And if their defense ain't going to show up, it doesn't matter what they do on offense. It could look like those lopsided 51-10 games. So the defense is what would keep them in these games and let them cover those spreads of 14, 17, 20. We know there's going to be a 20 at some point again, but hard to side with Miami. All right, so we repeated those Bills, Panthers, and Dolphins games in the Super Contest. Those were the three. We picked up another win in the Super Contest, which was the best pick of the week, honestly. It was the one that we had agreed on first. Usually our first pick wins, and that did happen last week. We picked the Raiders against the Houston Texans. And not only did the Raiders deserve to cover that game, Servo, they deserve to win that game too. They played very well against Houston, and it required another one of those crazy Watson while he's about to get sacked and fall on his tossing the ball up in the air. And Fells caught the ball, and and then at that point the Raiders fell apart. But Oakland has played good football 2 weeks ago against Green Bay. I know they lost the game, but if Carr doesn't fumble, who knows? Maybe that game changes. Oakland. They're probably going to go over their Vegas number and be better than people thought. They're hanging in a lot of games, so that could mean they'll cover some spreads from here on out. Houston will have to keep an eye on, Dan, because they got a ton of injuries now. They lost Watt. They've lost three of their defensive backs, too. And their offense, it took them almost 4 quarters to get Hyde involved heavily in the game. They don't have Fuller on the other side of Hopkins, so I'll be keeping a close eye on Houston, maybe some fade action with them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, like without Watson just pulling a rabbit out of his hat
every week.
That play. Yeah, and that's what they're relying on offense, which is crazy because how good this team could be, but their offensive line is just still. I thought it'd be better coming in. They made a couple moves, but this offensive line is just kind of hurting the overall upside for the team. And the Raiders could have won this game outright if Texans scored 14 fourth quarter points. They could have won this game outright easily, and I guess but there was the right pick overall to pick the Raiders in this one, so I like that.
Yeah, no doubt. Our final pick was the Colts. Bad pick also. honestly, against Denver. I mean, Denver. The thing with the Broncos that we've established, and now that we'll get into their changing of the quarterback, and maybe that will change their outcome. But the Broncos, whoever they play, their offense and the offense on the other side of the field is not going to have a lot of points. I mean, they're controlling the ball. They're handing it to Freeman 15 times. They're handing it to Lindsey 15 times. And then Flacco's on his back about 5 times. And that's pretty much the way that the Broncos have played this year. We'll see if this new quarterback, Ryan Finley, will end up doing it. Is it Finley that's starting for
Brandon Allen?
Brandon Allen starting. Finley starting for Cincinnati. Got him mixed up. Okay. Yeah, Brandon Allen actually liked a little bit at Arkansas in college. So, he was actually 2 years ago under Belima, was pretty good. Okay, so those are the games that we reviewed from the Golden Nugget and the Super Contest. Let's kind of real quick. Let's just kind of recap where we are in the college football season before we get into the lines. The big game this week, Servo, is Florida-Georgia, and both teams are on the outside looking in. Last week, for those people who maybe don't pay as much attention to college football, Kansas State ended up beating Oklahoma, winning, covering all those points on the road, winning outright, which I think, Dan, it may eliminate Oklahoma from the possibility of even jumping back into the Final Four. So as it stands right now, LSU and Alabama, Ohio State and Clemson are right there. I'll start off with asking you, do you think that there is a chance that any other team can jump into this thing? I'm of the belief that even despite the loss last week, that the committee, there's no way that Notre Dame would be put back after the way they played against Clemson last year. I don't care if they were 4, they'd find a way to make them 5. I don't think that would have happened. So now they're out. Oklahoma's out. Is there any other team on the horizon, or do you think that it ends up being this way in the end?
Yeah, so I agree that Notre Dame is out now, officially, I think, and Oklahoma, that loss is a killer. I thought they might run the table and get into the playoff, but yeah, but they're out now for sure, I think. And then I think there's 2 teams that could sneak in, actually, if depending on how some games go, because next week we have LSU Alabama matchup.
Huge game, right? But the loser of that game, if it's close, I don't think that they move at all. I think that team. Yeah. By the way, the loser of that game, Servo, doesn't play in the SEC championship, won't endure a second loss, and slides themselves right into that 4th spot in the playoff.
Exactly. So that's why I think whoever loses that game might actually have a better chance, because maybe in the SEC championship, whether it's LSU or Alabama, they end up losing to, whoever it might be, a Georgia or
Florida, one of those two
or
teams.
Florida. Yeah. Which that game's coming up here. I mean, I think one of those teams could actually sneak in. And then the other one is Penn State. I mean, it's not out of the question. For Penn State beats Ohio State, then they get in, right? So
yeah, that's the key. Well, they have Big Ten championship also.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it seems like between Penn State, Florida, and Georgia, there's still a chance for those teams. And this week, obviously, this is the huge week for the Gators and for the Bulldogs. I think on paper, Dan, most people feel like Georgia is the better team, but I don't think that the one loss that they have can be overcome if this is the end for them. And I'll give you an example. Even if they beat Florida, they're going to have to get themselves into the SEC championship and beat either Alabama or LSU to get in, because they lost to South Carolina. The Gators already beat South Carolina. So I think for Florida, they may require the same. They may have to beat Georgia this week, and they may have to go on and win that game in the SEC championship. But I think that this is probably a do-or-die game for both teams this week between these 2 teams in Jacksonville.
No, definitely. And it's going to be a really good game, because both these teams have just, as you mentioned, Georgia against South Carolina, just that they did not show up in what should have been an easy win for them. And Florida just has underperformed in general this year, in my opinion. And I think both teams have a chance to obviously get to the SEC championship and make some noise. But honestly, I don't think either of these teams have a chance against LSU or Alabama in that game, whoever it is.
Probably not, but just getting there would be enough if they felt
agree.
They could. Look, Georgia's 6.5 against Florida. I'm a Gator, so obviously I want the Gators to win. But let's just say for the sake of argument that Georgia beats Florida. Georgia in the SEC championship against either of those teams is a minimum, I would think, of an 8 to 10 point underdog going into that game. So you're right. It would be one of those is perception reality games in the SEC championship. So we'll see. But you're right. The game of the year, no doubt, 1 week from Saturday, 3:30 Eastern, LSU, Alabama. It may end up not meaning anything in the long run because these teams are so good, which is crazy to think. But what a great showdown that's going to be. So I'm looking forward to that game as well. Anything else in college that you want to get to before we start touching on the NFL games coming up this week? Because really there's I think there's one more, if I'm not mistaken, one more top 25 game this week of two teams facing off against each other, which is what we normally discuss. SMU and Memphis this week. Memphis is 5.5-point favorites. But beyond that, Oregon, maybe you think Oregon has any chance, Dan, of slipping it back into the 4? They're 5-point favorites at USC. I don't feel like the Pac-12 is going to get any love, though, at the end.
I know. I think they're just going to be one of those teams that are just right at 5 or 6 in the country that might just miss it. If they, that loss to Auburn in the beginning of the year is going to end up hurting them. This team has the talent. I mean, I just think that, as you mentioned, the Pac-12 is just the level of competition. It's kind of like the Big 12 for Oklahoma, like a one-loss Oklahoma team, kind of like a one-loss Oregon team. Just the level of competition is so much worse than a one-loss LSU or Bama. So, or even Ohio State, if they end up losing one game, I think I'd put them over Oregon or Oklahoma anyway.
Yeah, the problem is they don't play Penn State for a while, and so the one-loss team there, date-wise,
could move them down.
It's going to really hurt them. They're going to have to win a couple games to get back in. And look, Ohio State will play Michigan no matter how anybody sees that. It's always a big game. And now Michigan has a little bit more credibility now that they beat Notre Dame in that rain fest last Saturday night. Okay, so on to the pro game. 2 quarterback changes, Dan, that were announced. There weren't really any trades I thought of any significance that would affect any point spread to me this week. I didn't see a thing. Bengals are making a change with Andy Dalton being gone and Finley coming in, but the Bengals don't play this week. The line has not moved all that much with the announcement of Denver changing their quarterback to Brandon Allen. So at this point, I think that the quarterback changes when you're talking about one of the main guys in the NFL, Rodgers, Breeze, Mahomes, Matt Ryan, we saw a significant change last week. Matt Schaub came in. They were 4-point favorites. They went to 8.5 right before game time. But it doesn't look like the value is really there on Denver or Cincinnati making a quarterback change. In fact, maybe some people feel like it could get better.
Yeah, I think with the Bengals, it might get better because they might just let Ryan Finley, chuck the ball and see what he's got, because they're a team that will definitely be in the market to draft a quarterback if Finley is not that guy. And, Finley, he was a 4th-round pick, and I get that they want to give him a chance because clearly Andy Dalton's not the answer this year, or I guess in their future plans. They kind of know what Zach Taylor knows what he has, I guess. And so I'm interested to see, I guess, next week what the Bengals, how they match up, what their lines are, I guess, games going forward, because Finley could just be out there chucking it. Kind of like what the Jags are doing with Minshew, just letting Minshew kind of like do his thing. They got Fournette being a beast. But, Finley, I feel a lot more comfortable with the Bengals than with Allen with the Broncos. And the Broncos, you mentioned it earlier, the Broncos have Freeman and Lindsey that they can just kind of, divvy up the touches there and give them the bulk of the touches in this offense overall, and kind of let Brandon Allen be, I guess, like a game manager type.
I'll tell you from watching Allen in college, this guy's a little wild. I mean, he's got legs. He can run. I would not be surprised. I would not rule. I don't know if he'll be good or not. I don't know. My guess is no. From watching him play, to have to get to that next level of the NFL. I thought also a poor narrative was thinking that Mason Rudolph was going to be great, who was just basically a system quarterback at Oklahoma State. Not all of these quarterbacks, just because they're the shiny new toy, end up being great. He played for Rudolph played for one of the great offensive minds in all of college, in Mike Gundy. Allen played for Brett Bielema, and he was okay there, but then regressed a little bit. I agree. I don't think that they're going to allow him to be more than what he is, but if there's a prop about his rushing yards this week, Servo, I would go over that this week for Denver. He can move around a little bit, so wouldn't surprise me to see him do that. Any other NFL, before we get to our pick on the Thursday night game, let's close it out with any interesting spreads for you in the NFL this week?
I think one that I was looking at actually is the Patriots-Ravens. I mean, The Ravens are 4-point underdogs at home. This is the Sunday night game this week.
Yeah.
I see the Patriots losing a game at some point. I don't think they're going to go undefeated all year. And this might be the game. I mean, at least you're getting 4 points for the Ravens. You might keep it, within a field goal. We always talk about, just in general with the fantasy industry and all that, the betting industry is, how Bill Belichick and the defense kind of adapt to whoever that team's offensive playmakers are and just kind of focus on shutting them down. But this team, I mean, obviously Lamar Jackson is that playmaker, but Mark Ingram could have a big game too, and they could just kind of dedicate to the run in this game, or Lamar Jackson might just run crazy all over the Patriots.
I wish I knew the answer. I do. I wish I knew the answer. Jackson, I was looking at this morning. If those of you who live in New Jersey or where you can bet online on the FanDuel Sportsbook, they still have Lamar Jackson at, I believe it's about 5-1 or 6-1 to win the NFL MVP. And I wonder, and Rodgers is clearly the favorite. Russell Wilson's right after that. And no doubt they should be. But Servo, if Jackson was able to beat the Patriots, this is the last chance he'll be able to get with those odds, because certainly he's been the most dynamic player running the ball in the NFL, but this could also go the other way too. It is very hard to go against New England in any facet. We heard that last week. Oh, they can't cover against Cleveland. No problem. 2 weeks ago, can't cover against the Giants. That's 17. That's too much. No problem. And the problem with New England and going against them is that, number one, they keep scoring defensive touchdowns. And number two, just like every other year, they throw the ball in the fourth quarter no matter what they're up by 3, 4, 6. It doesn't make a difference. And their kicker, they're trying to get him some extra work before it really matters, because when it gets down to December, that's when the Patriots don't cover all their games. December, January, and February. They win, but they are not great against the spread as it gets closer to the postseason and in the postseason. They win, and they win a lot of championships, but a lot of those games tend to be close, especially when they're a favorite. So we'll see. I agree with you, but that's the interesting prop, at least, that I saw with that Jackson. I think that could surge right into that MVP conversation, but they got to win this week. They'll have to win that game against New England, or he just falls back to the pack. Any other games? Any other game?
Well, just to mention real quick that would be like the signature win for him, and kind of like you see in college football, like the Heisman moment. That would be his MVP moment.
It would have to be.
Won.
It would have to be.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The one other I was just looking at, from the early lines, is the Colts 1-point underdogs away to the Steelers, and we just we're just talking about this Dolphins-Steelers game on Monday night. I mean, the Colts are a lot better team than Dolphins, obviously, but if the Steelers come out cold like they did last night, I mean, the Colts and the Steelers, the Colts are a really good team. I mean, I know they kind of screwed you this last week, did not come through for you in the picks, but I mean, I think they're the better team overall than the Steelers right now. I know they're on the road, but it's interesting to see the 1-point line there, basically a pick'em game.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this: a couple of things. The first thing is it's not a 1-point spread anymore. The game's pick'em now.
Oh, okay.
And by the time the game starts, the Colts will be favored in this game. And I think that you have the right idea. So if you're looking to make an early bet, then you would probably want to take Indianapolis. The thing with the Colts, Servo, is that a couple of things that I would say. First of all, they're not running away beating anybody big. That's not happening. They're always playing late into the game where it's going to come down to a field goal one way or the other. They don't have that kind of explosive offense. Brissett's done a great job. Mack is good. So is Hilton. But I think Denver showed last week, and it showed 2 weeks ago, especially to me, when they played against the Houston Texans, and they could not put them away. Like Houston just kept coming back because they really don't have that guy that they could just put their foot down and just say, go. That could be the problem with the Colts. But whenever they're a short dog or a short favorite, I agree with you. It definitely does seem that way. Although I will say this, by the time the game kicks off, I think that the Colts are going to be 1 or maybe even 2-point favorites by the time Sunday kicks around. So good point by you for sure. All right, let's end it on Thursday night's game. We can give a pick, a lean, or do nothing, because that's what we do here on the Wager Alarm live stream. We don't force the issue and give you hot take picks. We know that a lot of you are wagering on our games. We've been doing this 2 years. And so wagering is not the thing to do hot takes on, because we take it seriously. So 49ers -10 at the Cardinals. The total is 43 in the game. My initial lean, Dan, on this one would wonder how this could possibly go over. I know that San Francisco scored 51 points last week. I think that was a little bit of an anomaly. I got to say, I was a little disappointed with the way the Cardinals played against the Saints. I thought that they would keep that game at least relatively close. 49ers probably have a better defense than the Saints, too. They lost that game 31-9. It never was really close. Cardinals don't have much of a running game. The other thing that's happened that's really interesting is that Fitzgerald has become less and less a part of the offense. I'm not really sure why that's happening. In the early part of the season, when they're having success, they were keeping him very involved in the game. Kirk is now a bigger part of their game, and maybe that's what they do moving forward. So my lean here strictly would be to the under 43. Home teams on Thursday night, Servo, have been fantastic. I would not lay San Francisco -10. I would probably pass on that and take the under. Any opinion for you?
The over-unders have been kind of hurting me all year. I've been missing. I've been going back and forth and missing on all.
All right, so pick a side here.
Yeah, I'm actually going the other way and saying the Niners. I mean, so the Cardinals, the offense just really worries me this week because of the whole running back situation. You know, David Johnson looks doubtful. Edmonds is probably out too.
Yeah.
And, we got Kenyon Drake being the lead guy. Short week learning the offense. I don't know how much work he's going to get as the guy there. And it's basically going to come down to Kyler Murray against this San Fran defense that has been just so good this year.
Yeah.
I think this is the game where we see who Kyler Murray is and how much he can get done like on his own when it's basically down to him, because this is the game where he doesn't have as much help as he has had all year. Maybe this is the game he throws the fits more often then, right?
I mean, they have to do something, and there's got to be a lot of short, quick passing. And Kingsbury has done a good job, I think, with Arizona. By the way, even though not a big trade with Drake, a nice message to send to the fan base after that disaster last year that they're kind of going for it. But sometimes when we look at that at the American League Championship Series, Servo, and I looked out at second base and I saw Aaron Judge standing there and Altuve next to him. This is Nick Bosa and Kyler Murray all over again. I hope they protect Kyler Murray and put two guys on Nick Bosa, because don't have me come back on this live stream next week saying that Kyler Murray got hurt because of this dude. Like, he's crushing guys out there. He caused three sacks and 2 interceptions last week against Carolina. He's the early on favorite, I would say, him and Shaq Barrett maybe for the Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL. This is one of those games, just like a lot of the other night games, unfortunately. And we did see good games Sunday night and Monday night, but Servo, these lines on the night games have been brutal. 17, 15, 14, 16. So many of these games have been over before they started. I hope for at least a competitive game on Thursday. All right, any final thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Just last thoughts. These Thursday games, I mean, they need to go at some point.
I agree. I'm done with it. Yeah, it took all the fun out of can't wait for the weekend games. I personally understand that the NFL is very unwilling to put games on Friday night because they understand that fans of football have families and they're all at their high school football games and they don't want to detract from that. But I got to tell you, there is nothing wrong with playing the NFL on Saturday night and starting off the week off on a Saturday night in the NFL and playing the rest of the games on Sunday. I think that is really the answer. Let these guys prepare a little bit more. I mean, what are you going against on Saturday night at 8 o'clock? The Pac-12 sometimes? Maybe there. I mean, how many Saturday night college football games this season in particular have been must watch? There really haven't been that many. So that would be the only way that I would go with it. But look, Thursday night football is outdoing World Series games on TV, Dan. So it ain't going to change anytime soon.
And it will, going forward anyway, no matter what the matchup is, even if it's just, two terrible teams.
Monday night has been like that too. What, at the beginning of the season, you didn't know that the Dolphins weren't going to be good going in and taking on the
we knew
taking on the Steelers, but they still put them on at least put them at home on Monday night. But all right, a story for another day. Dan, thanks so much for being part of the live stream tonight. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch all of your work over at Wager Alarm and all your picks this weekend. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Craig.
All right, thanks again also to John Impemba for producing the live stream. Howard and I will be back with our Golden Nugget football contest picks and our Super Contest picks this coming Friday night at 9 o'clock Eastern. So for John Impemba and Dan Servadidio, I'm Craig Mish. Hope you guys have a great week. Enjoy the World Series, and we'll talk again on Friday night, 9 o'clock, right here on the Wager Alarm live stream.